What's going on? This is, another episode of Streams of Thought. This is, I'm gonna call this a special episode in that it is, this is the Mother's, the Mother's Day episode. This is the first time that I'm getting to speak, probably introduce you all to my good friend Titus. Titus, are you able to introduce yourself? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, who are you?
My name is Titus Kaphar. I'm a painter, sculptor, soon-to-be filmmaker, if all works out well. Mm-hmm. And we're in my studio in New Haven, Connecticut right now.
Okay, nice. New Haven, yeah, I've heard so much about this compound you have up there. I've got little. I feel like I've been in virtual corners of the space,
right.
But I've yet to take the whole space in. Now, this is how long have you been set up here?
So this is my new studio. I've been here probably about less than 6 months.
Okay.
So y'all are really the first large group anyway of people to see the space.
Nice. And this is you have you and I have been speaking over the past few months.
Yep.
Really for some time, like while this new exhibit of yours sort of was taking shape, and now it's done, and you're ready to share some of that with the people. What is this exhibit called?
Yeah, man, this is kind of the strangest body of work I've ever made, to be completely honest with you. The process really was different than anything I've done before. So it's called From a Tropical Space. And that's my neighborhood, so you're gonna hear sirens. Let me pause for a second.
Okay.
So it's a body of work called From a Tropical Space. And you know my stuff. Like normally, the work is really historically based, and there's a lot of commentary on American history and the kind of deification of our founding fathers and things like that. And this work just really emerged as this kind of crazy surrealist narrative about these Black women and their mothers. I'm sorry, these Black women and their children who seem to be disappearing. I'm gonna flip this. And in each of the paintings, you can see that there's an actual hole that is cut out where the children are removed. And it sort of speaks to this idea of disappearance. And so when I started this work, I didn't know where it was going. I really didn't know what was going on, but I just felt compelled. And so I just followed these characters where they took me.
Mm.
So you can see that this is going,
Yeah,
back.
That's remarkable. Is that on wood or is it on canvas? What is?
So it's on canvas, and then I actually back it with panel in order to make sure the contour stays sharp.
Right.
When I first started doing this, I was cutting pieces out, and I would just leave them, and it was cool. But what happened is the figure would sag a little bit, and I didn't like that.
Right. Oh man. And how this exhibit? How many pieces are in it?
There's probably going to be about 9-10 pieces in the exhibition. This is going to be at Gagosian. It opens in September. It was supposed to open April 17th,
Right.
but COVID. So we couldn't do that. We had to switch it, but that's actually, in the end, it was all right because it gave me the time to just sit in the studio and just make the stuff that I wanted to make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, man. Could I see some of that stuff up close?
Yeah. Let's see.
Now, is each piece individually titled?
Yeah, so this piece here is actually called The Aftermath. And you know, this is part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you, man. After I saw your play, I was tripping. I was tripping. That shit was so wild, man. And it got me thinking about narrative and storytelling and the way storytelling has functioned in my work in particular. But you as a writer, the way you're always telling a story. And sometimes it's like underneath these layers, and we don't know it until like you listen to it 5 or 6 times and you're like, oh shit. now I get it. With this one, you know, when I first started this body of work, let me show you. I'm gonna start you from the beginning. So like when I first started this was one of the first paintings in the series. And so when I started this painting, honestly, to be completely honest with you, I liked it as a painting formally. I thought it was interesting, but it felt like it was about Black women taking care of white people's babies. Okay. And I finished the painting and I was like, I don't want to make paintings about that right now. Like I've done that before, and I'm not interested in showing these women in that way, right? Like a sort of a story that we've heard a little bit. Right. And so I put the painting away for a while, and then I came back to it, and then I asked myself the question, like, what in the composition requires that these babies don't belong to these women? And I realized that there was really nothing there. I mean, there's no evidence left of the baby in this painting, so there's no real way to know. And so then once I got to that spot, once I got to that point, it was just like, well, if that's the case, then maybe this is a narrative about Black women, Black mothers in particular, and their children. And that was the moment where I was like, that I can get into. All right, so cool. So what's the story here? What's going on with these women? Why are these babies disappearing? Where are they going? And so I made another painting, and I was trying to figure out in this painting, like, what does the outside world look like? Like, where are they? And when I got to the outside world, what I realized is that, you know, the outside world is saturated, it's ominous. There's something really, really strange going on in this painting. And in this one, the babies were sitting in these strollers, and it still felt a little domestic worker-ish. You know, the photographic references I was seeing, that's what it felt like. It felt like maybe. But why? What about that? Do you think says domestic worker? That's exactly the shit was messing with my head. Like I realized that my own biases, like from looking at images of Black women, looking at images of us throughout history of art, don't really make space for Black women to exist as mothers in the representation of painting photography. If you look at, like, let me show you something. So let's just take this for example, right? You know, you take any art history book, what are you gonna see? Mother and child, Madonna, right? You can, you know, it's everywhere, right? Yeah, the white image of the Madonna. Right. But we don't see representations of Black women in that context, right? And so you're gonna have to do some digging. Yeah, it's like content, like you don't, you know, not till you get to, like, you know, my girl Mickey, right? Right. You got people really, really doing that. And so you come to contemporary art before you get to that. But you don't see Black mothers represented in that way unless they're domestic caretakers, mammies, nannies, mammies, au pairs, that kind of thing. But like, to just flip through this book, am I gonna see a representation of a Black woman caring for her own child? No. You know how I know? Because I've been through this book about 100 times. So it's not gonna happen. It just doesn't exist. And so what I realized is all of my study, all of my research of Western history was making my perception of the work biased, right? And so if my perception of the work is biased, what does that mean for anybody else who is seeing it, right? Right. And so that was the reason why I sort of dove down this road with this particular project. I finally said, okay, I need to figure this thing out. I need to figure what the story is. and I need to figure out how to tell a story about these mothers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it, man. It's so crazy. I mean, because I'm hard pressed. You know, I got a chance to see a couple of these pieces super early on, as you and I were sort of sending stuff back and forth, and I never got, you know, at first glance, from the first few times that I looked at it, I never really saw these women as caregivers for someone else's children. Until you made that mention. But, you know, once you mentioned it, I was able to see, I guess, something different, like in their eyes. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
But yeah, you know, just like, I mean, at first glance, the imagery to me, I mean, it speaks to women caring for their children, and definitely, you know, the idea of disappearance, of loss, and all that. I definitely get that, but I felt that that was in the context of these being mothers and their own children. So
that's right, and that's the thing. That's the thing that messed up my head. To be completely honest with you, is like, man, what? Why is that stuck in your head? And initially I was just like, well, maybe I'm tripping. Maybe I just been looking at too many art history books. And then, you know, the painting I showed you with those two women sitting side by side, this piece over here, right? Like this painting, when I had some folks come visit the studio, white folks in particular, from the art world in particular, that was their first thought, right? That was exactly what it was. And, you know, the photograph, the original photograph that I saw that sort of inspired me to look at, to start thinking about these, show a lot of Black women like that. And so it took a while for me to separate. But when I had this woman come into my studio and she was talking about this painting, and she was talking about her experience with her particular Black caretaker, that's when I knew I had to dig into this. I had to push a little bit harder. And so by the time I get to these paintings, I don't think there's any question. By the time you get here, it's like, these are their children, right?
Yeah.
Like you look at this one over here, and the way that this woman, you know, is holding this child. This is her child, right?
Yeah, they're definitely like their mother and child, and it's wild. It's like, when I look at the Greyhound image, you know, I find myself asking, are they coming or going?
You know what's crazy about that?
Yeah,
that was the original title. Coming
oh
or
wow,
going. That was the original title. Because each one of these pieces, I don't know if it's like this for you when you're writing, but each one of these pieces, I feel like, has written its own story. Absolutely. And so like, I don't know all the answers. I feel like I'm just following what these characters are saying to me. Like, you know, what they suggest I do, or what they suggest needs to be in the composition. That's the thing that motivates that next move, right? So when I first sat down and looked at this piece, I was like, coming or going? That was the first thing I said. And what I realized in this story, in this particular like vignette, I guess, is like, so in all of these pictures, what you see is these women with their children and these babies disappearing, right? But in this one, there's something unique. First of all, they have this suitcase, they're packed, they're ready. They're trying to escape something. So either they came from a place and arrived here, and when they arrived here, they realized that this place is just as saturated and ominous as every place that they had been before, or they got ready to go in order to protect their children because they knew this disappearance, this vanishing was happening. And when they got there, their children still disappeared anyway. And so when you look, for example, at the expression on this woman's face right here, you know, she's the first in the whole series to acknowledge the loss, right? You can tell by like her furrowed brow that she recognizes this absence. Yeah. Most of the other women, we catch them like the instant right before they go, right before the children go. So
Right.
the weight of the body of the child is still resting on their chest, even though they're just gone. They still feel the warmth of the child's body up against them, even though they're just now gone.
Damn. You know, the other lady who's sitting down on the bench, I got something out of how, like, there's less detail in her face than there is in her right hand. Like that right hand of hers, like there's a lot of detail in that hand,
Yeah.
you know, like down to the veins and everything in her hand.
Yep.
But her face is more vague.
The whole series, the characters, so this whole idea of this of vanishing, the characters are in different states of appearing and disappearing. So like, you know, I'm gonna reveal this on camera, but most people don't notice ever that this woman only has one foot. She has two legs. You see two knees represented underneath, but she only has one foot.
Yeah.
So it's not just the children that are disappearing, right? Like the mothers are impacted by this disappearance as well. So let's say, for example, this painting over here, right? Her hand is in a state of disappearing in this particular painting, right? So it's not what I see it as is like when this disappearance happens, it has this ability to take a little bit of the mother with them, right? And so my question as I'm going through the story is like, where are these children? Where are they going? And then I ended up with this piece that's just called Last Chapter right now, which is like these three children that meet up with this character who's the prophet. She's this mute prophet, the only child who survived up until adulthood. And basically she survived because her mother kind of, the narrative that's building is her mother sort of died in childbirth, and therefore she lived because the culmination of that fear, which I think is a part of what happens to the children, that's a part of their disappearance, never happens for her because her mother dies. And so she becomes this sort of medium between the children in this space wherever they are, wherever this is, and the other world.
It's amazing.
So, and you'll see in this one, she's the only one like who's fully realized with color. She doesn't have that sort of like glow on her face in the same way that some of the other, but in this space where she's beginning to experience this flux for the first time. So you're actually seeing through, you're seeing through her, and the children are sort of responding to that nervously, actually.
I see.
So yeah, man. So like, I've been working on this with a writer friend of mine, Tochi, and I have been like digging into this narrative a little bit and trying to figure out where the story takes you. I'll give you a piece of the narrative that we're working on, and maybe you can post it with this, and it'll give a little bit more context for everything else. Oh,
that'd be great. Talk to me real quick about the significance of Octavia Butler as an influence to this project.
So a friend of mine, Zalika, she came to the studio and she saw this painting here, actually. She saw this painting and she was like, you need to read Kindred again. And I was like, all right. And so I started reading it again. And actually, to be completely honest with you, I got really frustrated. As I was reading. I got really frustrated as I was reading this book because I just sort of felt like I got this Black woman who goes back in time. She has all of the knowledge of history at her hand, and she is stuck in service to this white man, trying to allow herself, frankly, to exist in the future, right? Because she's afraid that if he doesn't survive, then she won't survive in the future. And so the reason that Zalika sent me to this piece was because she felt like this idea of this character who, as in Kindred, in the story, this character who can go from one period in time to another period in time, right? To move back and forth in history like this, in time like this, was related to what was happening here. And it really, at first, I didn't think it had that much of an influence until I started working on that final chapter painting with the children in the water. I was like, oh damn, she crept into my head. I didn't even know.
Man. Yeah, when looking at that, I keep going back to that Greyhound piece. There was a time, I guess when I was 11 or 12 years old, my mom and one of her homegirls packed up, like deep families. My mother and I, and then my mother's friend, who I guess she had like 3 or 4 children at the time. We all packed up and took a bunch of stuff down to DC. The idea we're moving to DC from Philly, and we were trying to get away from. This was crack epidemic. Crack, probably 1983, 84, when shit was really crazy in Philly. And I guess the idea was trying to get away from Philly, so we wanted to come to DC, and we all packed up and got on one of those Greyhound buses. One of my first. I'd been on a charter bus before, but never like the Greyhound, when you go to the station and get on a joint. And we went down to DC. We lived in DC, and from hotel to hotel for a minute. I remember, sort of doing some hotel scam, flim flam, for a few weeks, and having to leave certain places in haste. And then we wound up having to leave DC altogether, and we were living in a motel at one point in Baltimore, which was crazy, which was, like out of the frying pan into the fire back then, because it was way, it was way worse in Baltimore than it was in Philly, because we didn't have the any of the resources, any of the, the family, any of the other sort of system in place that we had in our hometown. So we wrote it out for a while. I think it lasted for maybe 6 weeks or so. It was like, it was an adventure. It was a trip. It was an experience, but the sky was no different down there. So we wound up right back in Philly, and just like moving to a different part of the city. But
I had a very similar experience. So when I was, I guess I was 12. When I was 12 years old, so I grew up in Michigan. My mother came home from work one day and was like, "We're leaving." I'm like, "What? Where are we going?" She's like, "We're going to California." I'm like, "What? That's crazy." So my mom, in 3 days, me, my little brother, my mother, and this other crazy dude who we won't get into, anyway, came with us, and we drove from Michigan to California, and it was crazy. We got there and ended up coming back. And so we took the Greyhound back. And that was,
that's a hike, yeah.
I wish everybody could have that experience and see America that way. And I wish that nobody ever has to see America that way, all at the same time, man.
I know exactly what you mean.
3 days on the Greyhound that's suffering, bro.
Cross country on the Greyhound, that ain't no punk. That's like, that's real deal.
That's real.
Let's get your kicks on Route 66.
So yeah, I think the Greyhound bus is symbolic of a lot of things, right? Like it's not an upper class form of travel. Let's put it that way, right? It is often people's last option. To leave where they're going. And to some degree, it has become a part of not the Great Migration, but different migrations to follow of Black folks leaving one community and moving to another. And like in your story, like, coming here and then recognizing that, like, these characters here in particular, recognizing that it's not better where they are. The sky is still fuchsia and saturated. So when my mom came and she saw this piece. She was in the studio with me. She saw this piece here. And to my surprise, she was like, "That reminds me of Flint." And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, you know, we can't even drink the water in our communities right now, right? If you drink the water, you're liable to get sick. And she said, there's something about the environment itself, that sky being that color, it's just too saturated to be beautiful, right? It's like, it's right on that tipping point where it's like, nah. There's something a little bit wrong with that. And so in that way, like these paintings, that anxiety, that fear, that's what these colors hold inside of these paintings here.
Yeah, no, that's very real. That's very real. So like if there was a name for this, the world in which, you know, all these different vignettes, these stories, this narrative takes place, you know, what would you call this place?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. That's a hard question, because like, as I started working on these pieces more, what I realized is this place is an internal geography. It's at once everywhere and nowhere, but what it is specifically is a sort of emotional manifestation of what's going on for these particular characters, for these particular women, right? And so to understand it simply as a like, that's California, which is how I first thought of this body of work. I was like, I knew it was going to be called From a Tropical Space. I don't know how I knew, I just knew. Okay. But at the same time, it was very clear that it's like, no. This is more than just place. This is an emotional, this is somebody's emotional experience. And so you're able to see like what's going on for them, not just in that place, but what's going on for them internally. So this painting here is called Intravenous, and it has taken on such a different read for me since COVID.
Yeah.
So like I wasn't, I started this way before COVID. I really wasn't thinking about COVID or anything else like that.
I remember, yep.
But like, you know, what's going on in the world, you know, you see this painting and you see this woman here with a hospital gown on, this robe behind her, connected to the IV. That's just like still in her, literally in her hand still. And it like dangles along like a leash. And you see that sort of glazed expression in her face. Like where is she coming from? She expected something, and that baby is still, you know, the baby is still gone. But you look at it now and you just think about our communities all over the place where they're not getting the kind of services they need at the hospitals. You know, my middle brother, Jonathan, ended up getting COVID, and he's in Detroit. And, you know, he had 105 fever, man. He had 105 fever, and they basically gave him Tylenol and sent him home because there was like nothing they could do for him there. There were no beds. He waited almost 4 hours in the lobby just for them to say we don't have any beds. And so he has a wife, he has a little baby. They have a tiny little apartment in Detroit. And so he ended up kind of locking himself in the room. But the doctors don't have the PPE that they need. There are not enough beds in the hospital. And it's not like this is COVID's fault. Like, I feel like that's what people are talking about. It's not like this is COVID's fault. Like, these problems have existed in our communities, in our neighborhoods for a long time, and COVID is highlighting that. That's it.
It's been exacerbated by you know the current pandemic, but it's just been this has been the case.
That's right. It's been the case for a really long time, and I think in that way, this work is about that sort of collective trauma that our mothers have to deal with on a regular basis. Whether it's like, you know, what does it mean to send my kid to a public school knowing that the prison to the school to prison pipeline is flowing smooth, right? What does that mean? What does it mean to allow my son to walk out in the middle of the day in our neighborhood with the police rolling like they do? What does that mean? What does it mean to be in a place where, you know, the very act of drinking the water is a dangerous deliberation, right? Yeah. These are the places that are impacted. So when you look at the statistics and you see, yeah, Black folks are suffering. Black folks, we've been suffering. This is not new. And the thing that upsets me about the whole situation is it doesn't seem like the result is going to be us fixing the problem. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like it's going to be, you know, deeper investment in healthcare. It doesn't seem like it's going to be real systematic change. It seems like the next time this happens, we're going to be in the same spot.
Mm. You spoke to me, you spoke to a few of your friends on a thread about, what you see as the responsibility of the artist during times of uncertainty like this. Could we talk about that for a second?
Yeah. Yes. I want to read something to you first.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to flip the screen. I'm going to stand here so I can see if I can find it. Okay. Probably give me 1 second. All right. Before, because this is going to take me 1 second to find this, but I think it's important and worthwhile.
Okay.
My question to you is: have you been fielding conversations or phone calls with people about this moment and their particular uncertainty or depression? And if so, like, how have you been responding to them?
I have been, I guess I've been looking to have a conversation. I've just been having organic conversation. And I mean, the current situation is obviously, it's almost the elephant in the room, but as is often the case with regards to tragedy and to loss and to, struggle and uncertainty, you have to, it's a delicate balance the way you approach it. So I haven't really been, just coming out the box asking people, how they personally been affected or, how their loved ones have been affected, unless, there was a case where I've already had a little bit of insight. So yeah, I've been trying to just like let it happen as naturally as at all possible. And strangely enough, we've sort of been arriving at the same place. And I feel like I know what your answer is to the question that I just asked you, but I want you to share it with the people. And I feel like that is, that's been sort of the consensus across the board with regards to, just the responsibility of the thinkers and the creative minds right now, and
so
really
this is
it's been historically.
So a friend of mine, JD,
I lost you. Like, I don't see you anymore.
Oh, you don't see me at all?
No. I mean, no, I do actually. I see
you see the other screen.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going to read this real quick and then I'll flip it back. So this is a friend sent this to me, and this is Toni Morrison from Times of Despair. And I feel like it answers the question precisely. Yeah. And it says, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilization heals. I know the world is bruised and bleeding, and though it is important not to ignore its pain, it is also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art. Toni Morrison. So, I mean, you know, she's a genius, of course, right? Yeah, so that's not, it's not surprising that we get those beautiful words from her. But when he sent that to me, that was after I sent the email out to like my friends and like just folks in the artist community. I just heard so much desperation from folks. And, you know, there were, I run this organization, Next Haven, and this is an opportunity for me to really share what I've learned in my art experience with that next generation of artists. And I'm really proud of the work that they're doing over there. And so what I wanted to be able to say to them is like, as artists, we've been through hard times before. Like, this is not the moment to question whether you should be making art, right? Like Toni Morrison says, that's how like civilization continues. If in this moment we don't tell our stories, no one will know. And so more than ever, you know, it's important for us to tell those stories. And it doesn't have to be COVID stories. Please, dear God, everything that happens doesn't have to be a COVID story. But at the same time, it's like absolutely positively essential for us to be engaged in those kinds of conversations right now, to express and make that art, whether it's painting, sculpture, music, whatever it is, like it's the time for that.
Yeah, without doubt. So yeah, so both you and I spoke about just sort of going into overdrive during the you know, these current times, the past, you know, few months or so, with regards to creative output and how you're almost more inspired now, you know, than ever. And I feel the same way. And you know, I'm more inspired now than ever to sort of connect with like-minded individuals, you know, for the greater good in that way, you know?
You know, I think you know this about me. Like, I am not a social media person. I don't have an Instagram. I don't have Facebook. I'm not on Twitter. I'm a studio hermit, man. I'm just like in my studio. I make the paintings. I like being in my studio. So when all of this happened, I was just like, cool, let me get to work. You know, this is the time to put in work. And it has been incredibly productive. I feel really lucky that this is my job. This is what I do. I get to spend my days exploring ideas and expressing them through paint, sculpture, and film. So I feel incredibly lucky. Everybody doesn't have that as an opportunity. So I'd never take that for granted.
Right. Yeah. You can't. Talk to me a little bit more about Next Haven. Are you based in New Haven, Connecticut? Like,
I am. So
is it a fellowship program? What is Next Haven?
So basically, so I went to Yale for graduate school, and the truth of the matter is, it was sort of an accident, really. What I mean by that is I didn't know what Yale was. Growing up, you know, that wasn't something folks in my neighborhood were talking about. Nobody was talking about, oh, I'm going to Ivy League. That wasn't a thing. And so when I was in undergrad, you know, I went late. I was like 27, 28 when I graduated.
Where did you go for undergrad?
San Jose State, California.
Okay.
San Jose State in California. And so when I was out there, one of my professors, my senior year, was like, you should apply to graduate school. And I said, cool, great. And my thought is, well, I'll teach, right? And so I applied to graduate school. I said, where should I go initially? And he said, you should go to Yale. I literally said, what's that? And he just cracked. I won't forget it. We were standing in the hallway, and he just started cracking up laughing. And then when he realized it wasn't a joke, he was like, let me help you. And so he helped me apply. And I applied the first time to Yale, and I didn't get in. And I was mad, man. I was like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Don't they know? Don't they know? And then I applied again, and I didn't get in the next time. And at that point, I had some real soul searching to do. And I remember sitting down on a curb reading that letter and going, yeah, you know what you are. You know that you're an artist. What do artists do? Artists make art. So number one, you're gonna keep making art. Number two, just keep applying to this program till people get so sick of you that they just finally let you in. And so I applied one more time to the program, but made a completely different body of work. And when I made that new body of work, that was actually the right work for the right time. I got into the program. I got to New Haven, Connecticut, and I was shocked because it reminded me a lot of Michigan, the neighborhood I grew up in, Michigan. And the thing about it, the big difference is you have this organization, Yale, with this almost $40 billion endowment. And right within miles of that, you have communities where the schools are failing folks, and there's no investment in the neighborhoods. And so I felt like it was really necessary for me to figure that out. Now, everybody else, for myself, everybody else after graduate school, you know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to move to New York. That's the mecca of the art world. So I moved to New York for 2 years, and it was great for my career and really hard for my family. I have 2 sons. My first son was born in New York, and I just couldn't imagine raising 2 kids in the tiny little apartment that we were in Washington Heights. And so we moved back to New Haven because I felt like it was close enough to New York that I could still do what I needed to do. So I'm here, I'm building my career. Most of my art friends are like, I don't know why you left New York. Your career is basically over. There's no way you can have a career from New Haven. Nothing's going on in New Haven. But it felt right to me. And New Haven has always welcomed me in. Fast forward, my career is building, things are working, and I'm realizing that part of the reason for my success is because of the fact that I am here, that I'm not every day dealing with every single distraction that comes up for you in New York. There's always an exhibition to go to. There's always a concert to go to. And there's always somebody dropping by the studio. So for me, living in New Haven was the most productive place that I'd ever lived. So I committed myself to being there and doing as much work there. So at that point, I've been here for, going on 5 years, and I'm realizing that artists are graduating from Yale and other schools really with no understanding of how the art world works. There's no conversation about the business of art. So artists graduate and they are trying to figure things out, and young artists are reaching out to me because they know I'm still local. So they pop by the studio, we have these conversations. And after a while, it just became a part of my thing that I would just kick it with these younger artists and we'd have conversation. And I'd be very, very vulnerable, open about all of the mistakes that I made in the beginning of my career. Just like, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, I did that. Take it, do whatever you want. I'm not embarrassed. I didn't know. Nobody told me this. But like now I'm telling you, so like you tell somebody else. And so that became the kind of foundation of what Next Haven was. I was walking down the street and I saw this building, and it was this abandoned warehouse where there was a bunch of legal activity happening in the building, and I needed a bigger studio, and it happened to be up for sale. The folks in the neighborhood had been complaining about the building because there were these trucks that were driving up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, actually. And then folks would be jumping out of the truck and all kinds of stuff was happening inside. And so when I bought the building, folks in the neighborhood were kind of like, we don't give a shit what you do, as long as you do something good. Like, we just want to see some positivity, that's it. And so I initially was just like, I'm just going to have a big studio. I walk in, the building's like 20,000 square feet. I don't need 20,000 square feet. And so the first idea was just like, okay, I'm gonna chop it up into separate little studios, and then I'm just gonna charge rent to folks, and I'll make a little bit of money off of that. And then that just didn't feel, nothing about that felt right. And so long story short, the fellowship just developed out of these relationships that I was building with these other artists. I met one of my friends, Jonathan Brand, who I went to graduate school with. He came in with me at the very beginning, and we started sketching this out. My boy, Jason Price, who has been like my right arm on this project. He's from St. Louis, and he is a Harvard Business School graduate, and he really helped me think about the way that we could build a program to really help these artists. So what the program is we have a 40,000 square foot space in New Haven, Connecticut, 1.4 miles away from Yale, and artists apply to the program. There are 7 fellows in the program. They get a $20,000 stipend, they get a studio space, and they get professional development training. We have a curriculum that we've been developing where we help artists to understand more about the business of art. Nobody wants to talk about it. Everybody wants to talk about it like it's gross and nasty or whatever. But the reality is graduate schools are putting out these kids, charging them $100,000 to go to graduate school. They come out with a bunch of debt and no idea how they're supposed to pay it back. And so, like, as I told one dean recently, you cannot talk about that as long as you're willing to pay for these kids' education. If the education is free, then it's fair for you to say, we don't want to talk about that. But if you're charging them, then you got to talk about it. You got to figure out some way to do it. So we're just very honest about it. We try to have conversations that empower them. We bring in lawyers. We bring in art accountants. We have them understand what it means to be in the business. We also have two curatorial fellows who are in the program. They also get a stipend. They curate an exhibition in New York and curate an exhibition in our space here in New Haven. And the big thing for our project is each one of our artists in the building works with a high school apprentice. So you have every artist has a high school apprentice that works with them on a regular basis. It's a job. It's not like an after school program. You're paid to be there. You got work to do. If you don't show up, you got problems. Like, right. It's a real job. It's better than minimum wage. It's not like a McDonald's job. And what we're doing is we're using this as an opportunity to introduce these young high school students to the highest level of art in a community where we don't really get that much, right? We don't get that. Yeah. So, and then the final thing really is just the building itself. Like, we did this in a building, an abandoned building, but we brought in an architect by the name of Deborah Burke, and her firm has designed something pretty spectacular. So y'all should check it out. It's Nexthaven, NXTHVN, Nexthaven, no vowels. I'm really proud of it, man. Like, as the art world gets more crazy for me, this is the place where I still feel really grounded. And so I'm there pretty regularly, but our director, Nico, is like, she's manning that over there. She's handling it, making sure everything is good. And we bring in artist studio visits all the time. As a matter of fact, you should come check us out.
Oh, I'm there. You know, I keep telling you, man, like, I was planning on actually, like, right now, like around, you know, between April and June, April and July, I planned on doing all these different studio visits with, you know, some of my friends and, you know, people that I've been sort of chopping it up with, folks who have inspired me, folks who I've inspired, not only visual artists, you know what I mean? Just creative minds that, you know, I've sort of been rocking with. And then this shit hits. So it's a little hiccup, a little bump in the road, but I'm definitely, I definitely plan on getting out there, man, to check out the spot. When you came to tonight's show, since you made mention then, I've really been, you know, just trying to wrap my head around it. And I feel like it's the sort of thing that I have to see to really, you know, to really grab it, you know? Absolutely. So what's the criterium, like, you know, to
get into the program?
Yeah, for the program.
So, like, anybody can apply to the program. We don't have an education barrier, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, you could only have a high school diploma, but if your work is dope, then you get in. It's a very rigorous judgment process. We bring in curators and writers and artists to look at these slides. Last year, we had something like 260 applications for 7 slots. Mm-hmm. So it is very competitive right now. But for us, it's just the quality of the work. Because what's happening is graduate school is becoming this hurdle for artists to enter into the art world. In other words, if you can't afford to go to graduate school, you don't end up with the kind of connections that are needed to make it in the art world. That's the idea. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we're trying to break that all down. And all of the connections and relationships that I have, I try to bring them to Nexthaven and leverage that for the opportunity of the artists that are in the program itself.
I a few months ago did a short, you know, just like a week-long intensive masterclass at Carnegie Hall for MCs. And,
really?
Yeah, and I had, you know, people who sent in submissions from all over the world, and it was, you know, close to 300 or so submissions for what became about 10 slots. So I, my criterion, I wanted some people who I passed through the program to sort of already be there and to be in a position where they could, make an impression upon some, artists who I saw potential in. So there were some people who I felt, I let into the program based on their potential and not, it wasn't like I judged them less harshly or, like there was a less rigorous scale that I use, I use the same barometer, but, some people I let into that program because I knew if they interacted with this other person, based on what they had to offer, it would make them a better artist. Do you do that sort of thing in your program?
Absolutely, man. Because there's so many factors, right? Like, I tell people all the time, like, talent just gets you through the door. It's not going to keep you in the room, right? And so, like, you can get somebody who is incredibly talented, but they don't have whatever that other thing is to be consistent. I want to help to foster successful artists, right? And I mean that beyond simply just their personal practice. I want this to have as wide a scope as possible. I want it to impact as many people as possible. And so the bigger platform that you have, the more voices that you reach, the more we can begin to change the landscape of what the art world is, right? And so the criterion has to keep into consideration all of those factors, right? Not just talent. That's just one part of it. The other thing is you are required to work with high school students. Not everybody can do that, right? Not everybody knows how to mentor people. And so you could be the dopest artist ever, but if we interview you and you're like, I don't really like kids, peace. Like, this is not the spot for you. Because for me, I need to know that all we are pouring into you, you're capable of pouring that into somebody else, right? And so we get to see that through the way you work with these high school students. And if you can't do that, cool, go to Skowhegan or go to, Studio Music Harlem. All these places are dope. They're great, but that's just not what we're doing.
Right. So are you, like, you won a fellowship, a MacArthur Fellowship?
I did.
What was that? First of all, for those who may not know, what is that award and what was it like? How did you wind up when they call it a Genius Award?
Dude, I got to walk around for this because, to be completely honest with you, I'm still tripping off of it. Yeah, that's what other people call it. I definitely don't call it that because that's some vain shit that I do. Like, my mama taught me better than that, so I'm sorry, I'm not gonna say that. But yeah, I save words like genius for folks like Dawood Bey and Kerry James Marshall and May Ween. Those are the people who get to carry that. But what I will say is it's a huge honor because of the people who are a part of that collective, that rare group of people who get acknowledged by this organization. And I was given this serious award with some serious money attached to it. And when they called me, and they said, this is the first thing they said. Hello, is this Titus Kaphar? Yeah, this is Titus Kaphar. Are you alone right now? What? Who is this? Like, who's calling me right now? And I looked down at the number and it's from Chicago. I was like, what? Who is this call? And who's messing around here, right? And they said, we're from the MacArthur Foundation. We would like to talk to you. Can you be alone? I said, all right, I'm gonna get alone. And so I ran out to the garage and I was alone. And they're like, we just want to let you know you won the MacArthur. And I paused for a second because I'm doing calculations in my head. I'm like, nah, that's not possible. So the first thing I said to them was, who is this? who's messing with me right now? And literally everybody on the line started cracking up laughing. Everybody started cracking up laughing. And then that just made it worse because at that point, everybody's laughing. So I'm like, oh, I knew it was a joke. I knew y'all were messing with me. And they're like, no, don't hang up. Don't hang up. This is serious. And then they do this thing, man. They read through all of their research. These folks have been watching me and my practice for almost 10 years. And so as they're going through all of the exhibitions that I've had, the Next Haven project, these, off the wall performances that I did that I thought nobody saw, they knew about. And so even though you have all this anxiety and this insecurity and like, I don't know that I really deserve this, you at the same time have to acknowledge that this is not an arbitrary decision. Right. You have to acknowledge that these people have done some research and they chose you for a reason. And so at that point, it just felt like I need to represent, right? Like I need to, if I've received this award, then I need to find a way to give back, to do more, not to shrink back, but to actually find ways to create more geniuses, whatever, to create more MacArthur Fellow opportunities. So for me, that meant even deeper investing into Next Haven.
Wow, that's dope, man. Very admirable. I appreciate the humility, because when I get mine, I'm like, yo, I'm getting I'm putting that shit on a necklace. I'm joking.
I hear that too. I hear that too.
But no,
I did my little dance.
When you came to check out Black No More, you were seated right beside Rashid Johnson, who's another brilliant artist who is now, he's a filmmaker. He's become a filmmaker now. Yeah. And you talked to me about, possibly getting into film, doing a screenplay. You talked to me about the narrative story behind each individual piece in this particular collection. Is that the very next step for you? Like what is next?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So my writing partner right now, Tochi Onobuchi, who is a Nigerian American writer, he's written that the most recent thing is Riot Baby, which is a really cool book. But he delves into this genre of science fiction, and he's just been a really great writing partner. And so we've been working on the script for this project fundamentally, and we're going to release a piece of it. But ultimately, I feel like these colors, I feel like this narrative is ripe for cinematic opportunity, right?
It is.
And I mean, I see the world this way, right? Like I see the world visually. And so for me, the almost obvious next step is to just put it in motion. And that's what film does, right? That gives you the opportunity to put these compositions in motion, to feel and hear the expression of the individuals inside of the world here. And so I'm incredibly excited about that as an opportunity. So yeah, that's definitely my next step.
Do you think it's worth the effort to try and guide an audience regarding your thinking about an artwork, or is it better to let them, to let the beholder sort of decide as they will?
That's a really interesting question. I think there's a philosophy where as artists we are more or less supposed to make the work and then let the critic tell us whether it's good or bad, tell us how to understand it, tell us how to even read it. And people care about what we say to a certain degree, but particularly in the visual arts world, the idea is like, you put the painting up on the wall and you step away. You might have a little bit of wall text, but that's about it.
I can't do that with this body of work. I've done that with a lot of other bodies of work and felt like, people will take from it what they want to take from it. And the truth of the matter is you can't control it anyway. They're going to take what they want to take from it.
Right.
But what I can't do is I can't stay quiet about what I think is happening, partially because the way this project evolved, I'm as much a viewer as I am a maker. I feel more like a director who has been given a script than I do as a writer who is writing the script. And I know that's weird considering we're actually writing this stuff down. But in terms of images, that's what it feels like to me. And so I struggle with this because I know that these paintings are ripe for interpretation. People are going to have all kinds of ideas about it. And I want them to. But I feel obligated and I feel protective of these Black mothers in this situation. I know the world to be too racist for me to not put down what I think is happening in these works and just leave it for other people to interpret. And that might be wrong. That might not, I mean, I can see the art historians and the scholars out there, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do, let the work speak for itself, right? Let the work work. And I get that. And that's always been, my modus operandi, but yeah, I'm not going to do it this time.
Not now. Yeah.
I'm just not. And so my suggestion is, ignore me if you want to. Don't pay attention to what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I have to say it. I don't really feel like I have a choice in the matter.
Yeah, man. I admire you for that. I think this new work is breathtaking. I've been inspired, since I discovered your work. It was great to meet you. It's been great, to have the sort of dialogue that we have.
Yeah.
Moments over the past year or so when whenever I feel almost least inspired, not because I never really have writer's block, but whenever I feel like I'm not performing at my optimum capacity, you'll send me something, a book reference or an image or something that sort of jolts my inspiration, again, to where it needs to be. And, I really appreciate the having a relationship where we're able to work with one another in that way. I mean, I've played music for you. I've sent you music that,
I know.
That made
this is the first one, right? So this is the first one that I sent to you. And I said, I think you probably still have the text. I said, yeah, I made this listening to streams of thought. I was like, and that was your first response. Cause you were like, I think you said something like, that's interesting. Cause I feel like I could write something to that. And I was like, I came back to the studio, turned it up even more and started working again. So all that to say, man, the feeling is definitely mutual. Yeah. It's a full circle moment, man. And, I'm really excited to see, what the future is going to hold for you as a filmmaker and, where this project is going to evolve to, where it's going to live, I appreciate it, man. Me too. Hopefully in the fall, I'll be coming out to a huge opening at Gagosian and for sure. It's going to be something super dope. But thank you, man. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much, man. And thank you for being candid and for your honesty and just love, man. The utmost amount of respect for you, Titus. I appreciate it, man. Good to talk to you again. For sure.